Hello everyone. In the previous two lectures, we have seen Vico's historical cycle and the challenges in the contemporary world indicated by it. Our question now is then if there are solutions to these problems. If not, it would mean our civilization would revert to barbarism. So here, let's think together about what causes this historical cycle and what we can do to prevent it in order to build a stable and peaceful society. At the end, I will propose that we establish the field of metaphysical engineering. Sounds a bit difficult, I know. Anyway, let's start. First, there are two interpretations of human society. One is realism, and the other is idealism. So let's look at them here. Realists describe the world as the survival of the fittest. As we can see in the animal world, the strong prey on the weak. In this competition for survival, it's a war of all against all, as Thomas Hobbes described it. We are allowed to do anything for our survival or benefits. Murders and robberies, you name it. It's the victim's responsibility. If you don't want to suffer, get strong. How, then, can we keep order in a world like this? You cannot survive by behaving as you wish. No matter how strong you may be, you don't know when your enemy will attack you. So you must conserve energy. Also, as you grow stronger, people around you become concerned and get together to restrain you. And if somebody else is gaining power, there will be another alliance formed against this person. So tomorrow, today's enemy might become your enemy's enemy, which is your friend. That's why you don't completely destroy your competitors. So realists study bargaining and military strategies to maintain subtle balances by creating a web of intrigue and coercion to keep society going. On the other hand, idealists believe people are ready to contribute to the whole of society, and in return, benefit from the stable and peaceful society they create. Here, citizens always think first about the interests of society, not of their own. A society like that needs a leader who decides how contributions made by citizens should be used in society. There, citizens entrust full power to a leader with great competence and integrity, who would make decisions to benefit all and assign roles and responsibilities according to the abilities of individual citizens. Peace and order will be maintained by the citizens following the orders of their leader. Here, it is the leader who bears the heaviest responsibility and makes the biggest sacrifice. His or her actions become examples for others. In such a society, the competence of the leader becomes decisively important. So, the great concern of society will be how to train leaders with a high level of competence and integrity. In this way, both realists and idealists have tried to establish a stable society, but neither has succeeded. Civilizations continue to rise and fall. Why is that the case then? Its fundamental cause lies in the fact that neither realist nor idealist societies exist in their pure forms. In any society at any point in history, these two coexist. This diagram shows it. Realists are likely to be those who believe that they are strong enough to come out on top in the struggle for survival. So they believe they will not have to make any compromises as to their individual pursuits. Next, as to idealists, there are two kinds. One is committed idealists. They will pursue their idealist mandate regardless of what others do. They are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice if needed. The other is naive idealists. They are willing to adhere to the idealist tenet only if others will do, or only if the cost of doing so is minimal. If the cost becomes too high for them, they will abandon the idealist cause. Here, let's look at Vico's cycle. It's this one, do you remember? In any society, the majority will be naive idealists. Less numerous will be realists. The least numerous will be committed idealists. But the proportion of their realms changes in this cycle. At some point, the sacrifice to be made by contributing to society is low, prompting most naive idealists to stay in the idealist realm. At another point, the sacrifice becomes too high for many people, causing them to abandon idealism and enter the realist realm. This diagram shows it. First, let's look at the age of gods. This is the age when the influence of idealism is greatest. This comes out of barbarism. People are tired of the situation in which they constantly have to struggle and are ready to make significant sacrifices if their society can get out of this condition. There, committed idealists lead naive idealists to form an alliance to restrain realists in the middle layer. The middle layer will never completely disappear, but once committed idealists obtain political power and use this power to encourage altruistic good behavior while discouraging selfish bad behavior, the sacrifices people are required to make will become smaller. As a result, most people will stay in the idealist realm. This will further reduce the size of the middle layer, strengthening idealism. Next, let's look at the age of heroes. There, in the middle layer, realists engage in power struggles. In the age of gods, this struggle is contained to a minimum and will not spread to other realms. But during this age, it will. While fighting among themselves, realists try to place naive idealists under their rule. Some scholars compare this effort to the struggle among mafias. That is, their internal fighting endangers the lives of the general public. Then, despite the fact that they are causing this peril, they demand money in exchange for protection from their rivals. They also establish their own territories, imposing all kinds of levies and burdens on residents there. This is how the general public is dragged into the struggle among realists. Most recently, we saw Putin of Russia invade Ukraine when his ruling position was threatened due to the spread of democracy in the surrounding countries. He said that it was because the state of Russia was being threatened, not his rule. This is to rule by fear, so the territory must be within reach of threat and caution, and cannot be extended very far. There, as they notice idealist leaders enjoying full power, they find an effective way to rule in it. If they can make people believe they are committed idealists, people will believe and obey them. Also, they can use people as tools for their power struggle. Just by pointing out the evilness of their rivals, a realist can persuade people to attack them, believing that it is to defend good. For realists, it is an inexpensive army. As a result, it becomes possible to establish such an extended territory as a state. It's defined as the divine right to rule, where God bestows the right to rule on kings. When religion lost its influence, another idea called nationalism was used instead. Once they gain a position of power, they will demand that people be loyal to their desires and needs. There, people loyal to the welfare of all will be punished. And over time, people will start to realize what is happening. Disillusioned, they will stop supporting idealism. Some will leave the idealist realm out of fear, and others will enter the realm of realism when they see people who support realist rulers well rewarded, feeling that staying in the idealist realm is not worth. As more people join realism, its realm expands, which causes further expansion. As a result of this vicious cycle, the idealist realm will be diminished. Next, let's look at the age of man. People eliminated the king, whom they had trusted, only to find out that he abused the bestowed power for his personal interests. Unfortunately, this also eliminates the realm of committed idealists. Those who remain are realists and naive idealists. If the former become leaders, they will be wolves pretending to be sheep. If the latter becomes leaders, they will put their personal welfare first, and only when it is met will they consider the welfare of society. So they will not be able to defend the idealist realm. A society that has lost competent leaders cannot anticipate potential problems and prevent them. Even if they can, their hands are tied in a society that excessively emphasizes freedom. People are loath to have their freedom limited, and a society under no control will experience repeated crises. The process starts when more people enter the realist realm voluntarily in search of fame and wealth in a free society. as the American dream represents, anyone is given a chance to succeed. This does not mean, though, that most people can succeed. Indeed, only a handful can. The realist world is cruel. Those who enter there without proper preparation will be preyed on. Realists incite naive idealists incessantly. In recent years, not only shady organizations, but also big banks gave out loans to buy real estate to those who had no prospect of paying them back. Naturally, so many people defaulted. To make matters worse, the damage was not contained among them, but spread to many parts of society, causing the economy to fail. As a result, people living faithfully in the idealist realm were drawn into the fiasco and suffered. Also, in democracy, people, being more conscious of their rights, tie the hands of the government. We have seen an example of this recently. If the government were given authority, it would be able to create an industrial structure that could endure crisis and assign jobs to its people. But here, people get jobs they like. Many choose jobs in industries vulnerable to crisis, such as entertainment and restaurant businesses. In Japan, when the COVID-19 endemic broke out, the government had to give compensation to people in these industries because they were asked to stop working. As a result, a serious financial burden was placed on the government. If these kinds of problems happen regularly, society will inevitably be ruined. Now, let's look at the border between realism and naive idealism. As we can see in this diagram, there are numerous pyramids on the border. Most people should belong to one of them through their jobs or social activities. When democracy starts to decline, these pyramids will also start to collapse. The corrupt ruling layer may have been preserved in some of them. Recently, some religious organizations have come under scrutiny. Such organizations use something like alchemy to seduce naive idealists. Scientific development has successfully eliminated alchemy in the physical world. But in the spiritual world, we do not have ways to prove it wrong. So people go for it. Also, without malice, some leaders who lack managerial skills impose burdens on their employees to protect themselves. Once, the state of California raised the requirement for a high school diploma enough to enter the state university. A high school diploma is required to get the certificate for a job such as an auto mechanic. So, those who cannot reach that standard, quite a few I presume, cannot even make a living and drop out of society. I heard some say that it was because a dean of a state university complained about the low academic level of incoming students and demanded that high schools raise the level of the students. If that were the case, it would be an example of incompetent leaders who demand to make their jobs easy, instead of grasping the impact on a wider range of society. In this way, people no longer have to worry about abuse by a king, but they are dragged into individual struggles for survival against smaller threats. Here, even if the government tries to intervene to help struggling people, those who are in their own struggles cannot afford to offer help that the government asks. Rather, they also need help. So people have to fight over limited resources. When it becomes impossible to save everyone, society will become divided. As this trend deepens, people will feel strongly that there is no one else but themselves to defend them. Then they become isolated and afraid. This will fuel realists, naive idealists who are left defenseless in the realist realm, are easy prey for them. In the end, they will say the current government will provide no support and should be destroyed, presenting themselves as saviors. Then, poor naive idealists will elect them into positions of power, or follow their calls to resort to unlawful actions such as terrorism to bring down the government. Society will be put into further confusion, causing even more people to drop out. In this vicious cycle, society will collapse. When the idealist realm completely disappears, society will revert to barbarism. On occasion, before disintegrating, society goes through autocracy, when people bestow full power on one realist in order to get out of total chaos. The Roman Empire would be one example. But this is only temporary and will be dismantled by the realist law that does not allow concentration of power. So far, we have learned that humanity had suffered in a vicious cycle in an attempt to establish an ideal society, only to create even more severe suffering. Then, is there any way to solve this problem? For this goal, we need to synthesize idealism with realism. Here, I propose that we establish the field of metaphysical engineering. Let's examine this field now. Metaphysical engineering goes in parallel with physical engineering. The physical engineering is to protect people from natural disasters, such as earthquakes and lightning, by erecting sturdy buildings. Metaphysical engineering is to protect people from social disasters by creating stable social structures. Let's now look at what issues are at stake for metaphysical engineering in order to end Vico's cycle. Our investigation indicates that the cycle is caused by realists encroaching on the idealist realms. So, the first issue is to protect the border between the realms of committed idealists and realists. First, Having leaders with high integrity and competence is an absolute necessary condition for society. For this, leaders must prove their qualifications. Physicians who deal with people's lives must receive many years of training and then pass national examinations to receive their certificates. This should also be the case for politicians who deal with the life of a nation. Here, physicians deal with individual lives, but dealing with the life of a nation means everyone's life in the nation is at stake, so it may be even more important. Just as we can't trust laypeople with our lives, we cannot trust laypeople with national politics. Absolutely not. That's not enough, though. We must implement a levy with, how shall I say, selective permeability to make sure those and only those who are qualified can get through this border. There have been efforts made toward this goal. Plato insists that those who don't possess integrity should not be given the knowledge needed to rule. However, what is meant by integrity here is to have the mental strength to overcome the temptation to stop doing the right thing when it is hard. He did not suppose there were always a group of people who did not believe there was such a thing as a right thing. Plato also assigns duties to soldiers to discipline violators in society. But those with high military skills are the strongest candidates for realism. So how can we assume they will support idealist leaders? I detect here the problem of civilian control. Hindu society implemented the caste system and fixed social positions for this purpose. But people's integrity and competence are not hereditary, so the system became corrupted to be a means to protect vested interests. China adopted an imperial examination system to promote only the competent. But those with the abilities to pass this difficult exam to test their intelligence were by nature strong elites. In the end, it only created a group of ambitious people who would use their intelligence for their own benefit. The second issue is to defend the border between the realms of realists and naive idealists. Especially in democracy, this border tends to be vulnerable. There, citizens are taught to believe that they can be anything they want to be. But it is so hard for people to calibrate their own competence accurately. So those who could not possibly survive the cruel world of realism started to enter there. As a result, the border was breached. Here, we see an engineering problem. The basic engineering practice is to balance opposing forces. Take designing an aircraft, for example. Wings are necessary to gain lift, but wings cause drag. With bigger wings, more lift can be generated. but it's better to make wings smaller to reduce drag. When a delicate balance is reached in between, an aircraft can fly. This goes for metaphysical engineering too. A society that achieves a delicate balance between rights and duties can gain stability. In democracy, this balance is tilted too much toward rights. This balancing problem does not occur only between rights and duties, but is seen in many parts of society. In Japan, we can see an example in the case of the COVID-19 endemic, where infectious disease specialists insist on preventing the disease from spreading, while economists on protecting economic activities. This would be the equivalent of lift specialists and drag specialists, insisting on increasing lift and decreasing drag, respectively, in designing an aircraft. A novice would know it. A specialist must be the one who can find the right balance between the two forces. But here, the decision is left to politicians, amateurs on these issues. It seems that this society, which has lost competent leaders, is so fragmented that it is dysfunctional now. In this way, metaphysical engineering is absolutely necessary to achieve a stable society. Let us hope that it will be established as soon as possible. But while it is easy to say that, we wonder where we can start. Here, we can model after the field of physical engineering. So let's first look at this field. The field of physical engineering looks like this. First, there are horizontal connections among subfields such as electronic engineering, mechanical engineering, and chemical engineering. Then, there are vertical connections from theory at the bottom to design, to production and maintenance, and to operation at the top. Any project is executed through close connections among them. An example of these connections is shown here in the case of designing and producing an aircraft. The same kind of close connections must be established in metaphysical engineering too. The subfields to be included at the bottom are theology, which deals with the matter of emotions, and philosophy, which deals with the matter of intelligence. From there, going up to political philosophy, to practical fields such as political science and economics for bureaucrats, and to policies for politicians at the top. You can see that in this diagram. According to this diagram, those who have bachelor's degrees should be qualified to be politicians, and those with master's degrees to be bureaucrats. And a system in which they can cooperate closely with academicians with doctoral degrees must be established. Plato proposes that philosopher kings will take turns ruling in the realm of committed idealists. However, since the contemporary world has problems too complicated for individuals to handle, institutionalization like this will be necessary. Unfortunately, however, unlike physical engineering, metaphysical engineering does not have any common language among subfields. Those who belong to the pyramid of physical engineering can all communicate in their common language of mathematics. They also share common knowledge, such as calculus. But theologians cannot communicate with economists. They do not share any common knowledge either. So, it is impossible for the subfields to cooperate with one another. We still have a long way to go. But once we can overcome these problems and successfully establish the field of metaphysical engineering, people will be able to live peacefully in a safe society, just as they can travel safely in an airplane. Also, as physics can now successfully distinguish authentic refinement of gold from alchemy, metaphysics will be able to distinguish authentic religion from false religion, saving people from falling victims. So, that's metaphysical engineering. I hope you get a little interested. If you want to know more about it, you can get a printed book. But you can also read an ebook for free if you go to this website on the screen and click the book icon the arrow indicates. It requires a little background, but if you like, please try. That's it. Hoping that someday metaphysical engineering will free us from Vico's cycle and let us forever live in a peaceful and stable society. I will end the lecture series here. Goodbye.